Dr. Annie Bukacek, and I'm here to talk to you about claims being made for solar and wind power and electrical vehicles, that they are renewable, sustainable, clean and green, that they represent climate justice. Is any of this true? This came out in CNN. It was a short stint on the dirty trade fueling our clean energy. Solar and wind power production is known to be destructive. Strip mining for rare earths and other metals are extracted with hydrochloric and sulfuric acid, which contaminates surface water, creates acid mist. Radioactive thorium must be extracted. These processes divert land and water from food production, and there's heavy use of petrol and water. Production of solar and wind power relies on strip mining cobalt, nickel, copper, lithium, and rare earths. If strip mining is not green, then solar and wind power production is not green. Does strip mining appear green and clean to you? This is in Myanmar. Here's some other countries. Third world countries, always looks the same. Doesn't look green to me. There's also heavy use of petrol in precious metal mining that is essential to solar and wind power. This is a CAT 994. It burns 1,800 gallons of fuel in a 12-hour shift. This machine is required to move 500,000 pounds of earth in order to get the minerals needed for one single Tesla battery. Petrol and pollution in rare earth mining, this is what it looks like, does not look clean and green to me. Solar and wind power are toxic to the ecosystem, and toxicity is not limited to strip mining's effect on vegetation and air quality. Production and maintenance are toxic to humans and other animals. If production and maintenance are toxic, then solar and wind power themselves are toxic. I call it the blood diamond colonial business model, what I call rare earth cobalt, nickel, lithium mining. Brutal labor and toxic exposure, and that slave labor includes the labor of children. These are some photos that are very, very difficult to look at. Some of those children look like they're 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old out there working these mines. And this man, this is part of the work that's involved in rare earth mining. Rare earth metal mining for so-called green energy. This is an article it was an AP article that was published August 19th of 2022, and it was called Myanmar Bears the Cost of Green Energy. It says the birds no longer sing, the fish no longer swim. The cost of rare earths is environmental destruction, the theft of land from villagers, and the funneling of money to brutal militias. If the people complain, they too face the threat of death. Electric cars require 6 times the non-renewable minerals as conventional oil-powered vehicles do. Typical EV battery needs 8 kilograms or 18 pounds of lithium, 35 kilograms of manganese, and 6 to 12 kilograms of cobalt. There's also the mining for copper for electrical wiring. 60 to 70% of cobalt is mined in the Congo, where corruption, violence, and child labor abound. This beautiful child, those of you that are pushing this Green New Deal, do you care about children? Those women in the background that are up to their knees and thighs in toxic waste, do you care about these people? And how about transportation of the building blocks of solar and wind power? Is transportation of these products, is it clean and green? Only if you consider petrol to be clean and green. This is transporting a wind turbine blade thousands of miles. I couldn't find a photo of shipping solar panels, but this was an ad that I found for a company. Another one, heavy use of petrol to transport these. If petrol is not green, then petrol-intense transportation of structures for solar and wind power is not green. What about overseas transport of solar and wind power components? Less than 1% of solar panels are made in the United States. Most are made in China. Let that sink in. 25 to 40% of wind turbine towers are made outside the United States. 50 to 70% of blade and hub for windmills are made outside the United States. Close to 100% of the pitch, bearings, bolts that are used for wind power are made outside of the United States. This is how they're transported. A lot of petrol. Where's your carbon footprint there? How about the maintenance of solar and wind power in electrical vehicles? After they're produced and transported, are solar and wind power in electric vehicles green once they're in use? No, they're not. They're very hard on the animal population. This is in windmills. Estimated 650 to 750,000 birds are killed per year by wind turbines and over 1 million bats. And many of those birds are large birds of prey, some of which are on the endangered species list. And whales, this is one that I learned about just recently. Acoustic pollution from offshore wind farm interferes with whale communication and navigation. What happens is these whales get confused, they get isolated from other whales, they wash up on shore, they get lost and they wash up on shore. And keep in mind, whales are mammals. There's a lot of talk about shutting down dams, hydroelectric dams, because the warmth in the water is hard on the fish. In reality, for over 50 years, we have the technology with these hydroelectric dams that we can cool the water sufficiently that warming is not a problem. So that a big deal is made out of that for salmon, but here are mammals, and it's totally ignored. You never hear about this, or almost never. You have to really search for this kind of information to know anything about it, that whales are being endangered by offshore wind. Another thing, wind turbine gears require oil, and blade efficiency requires hydraulic fluid. So wind turbines, wind power requires petrol. And in states with weather like Montana's, off-grid solar power includes major use of generators, usually, almost always, run by petrol. And here's some examples of some disasters with the windmill turbines. You've got blades. The latest blades are 170 to over 350 feet long, and they're twirling at 120 to 180 miles per hour, and there are flammable fuels in there. It's a recipe for disaster. Electric car charging stations typically use petrol. The cost of charging electric vehicles is related to petrol and electricity prices. There was a headline November 1st of 2022, electric car charging in Italy more expensive than gasoline. We remember with Hurricane Ian how there were electric cars, many of them, that caught on fire. This is an example from just last Saturday. There was a lithium battery fire in Manhattan that left 38 injured, 2 of them critically injured. These people were hanging from the windows. The other thing about lithium fires, they're more hot than, say, a wood fire. They're chemical, and they're electrical fires, and they're severely hot, and the fumes get in the lungs and can cause severe damage. This is a big deal, and we're hearing more and more about this. Firefighters here, they're dunking an on-fire electric $150,000 BMW into a tank of fluids. Requires petrol and water, a lot of it. There's an electric car prediction. 125 million electric vehicles will be in the United States by 2030. They're supposed to be phasing out gasoline-run cars. The maintenance of an electric vehicle requires coal and petrol to charge the batteries in those charging stations. There's $36,000 for replacement EV Ford truck battery. $36,000 to replace that. And if an electric Ford truck replacement lithium-ion battery costs $36,000, imagine how much it's going to cost for those $400,000 electric school bus replacement batteries. If it's on par with that $36,000 for the Ford, we're looking at $150,000 to $200,000, maybe more than that, to replace the lithium battery on these electric school buses. And the private sector is not going to take care of this. It's going to be more tax dollar and Federal Reserve printing press money for subsidies. Those are coming up. So what did award-winning American economist and statistician Milton Friedman say about government subsidies for projects? Nothing is so permanent as a temporary government program. So-called infant industries protected by the government never grow up. And this is reality. After 20 years and $5 trillion in government subsidies and investments in solar and wind sources of power, oil, natural gas, and coal still provide 84% of all the world's energy, down just 2% in 20 years after $5 trillion of government subsidies. Oil still provides 97% of global transportation. And don't forget this electric vehicle maintenance cost. It takes 100 kilowatts to charge an average Tesla electric car. That's the smaller car, about 100 kilowatts. That's more than the power cost of an average home for 3 days. A typical home in this country is about 30 kilowatts. So charging up this battery is more than one home would use in 3 days. And then don't forget also the expanse of land required for massive solar and wind farms. Hundreds to thousands of acres. Take a look at these photos. And the best way to get a perspective to look down at the cars that you see there, the trucks and the buildings. You can't even see people. I mean, these things are huge expanses. So when you hear about, and they talk about plans for keeping land free of human projects for the sake of climate justice, for the spotted owl, back to nature, those kinds of things, think hypocrisy and deception. And think about this. And again, to give you a perspective of how large this field is of solar panels, look at the buildings and look at the trucks. This is huge. And the wind farms, same thing, hundreds to thousands of acres. Solar and wind power are not renewable. They keep calling them renewables. Production, transport, and maintenance are not renewable, nor is their disposal. The lifespan is 15 to 25 years, and they are not biodegradable. This is where they end up. The landfills, somebody's backyard, the dumpsters. Now think about it. The solar panels in this field, for instance, for an example, they're going to expire at about the same time. Think about the landfills that those are going to be in. That'll make this one look like a child's sandbox compared to the one when they're filled with this many wind turbines. Lithium battery lifespan is 10 to 15 years. Unlike alkaline batteries, lithium batteries can catch fire if crushed, and they contain hazardous materials. They require special treatment at a recycling center. This is just an example of a couple of the car batteries, the EV batteries. You can see that little 18650, that's a battery that you people might have seen. The diameter is 18 millimeters, the length is 650 millimeters, and in a P100D module, there are over 8,000 of these in it, and those have to be broken down. They can't just be thrown in the trash. This is what we're looking at. So solar and wind power are reliant on petrol and coal. Their production, transportation, maintenance, and disposal are reliant on petrol and coal and landfill disposal. If petrol and coal are not clean and green, then solar and wind power are not clean and green. So they're not eco-friendly in production, transportation, utilization, and disposal. Do they at least provide what Montanans need? Montanans cannot survive without reliable access to readily dispatchable power. Montana is number 2 per capita in the United States for power consumption. That's because it gets cold here. North Dakota is number 1 and we are number 2. We cannot survive without reliable access to readily dispatchable power. And what dispatchable means, dispatchable power is the base load power, the power available to you 24/7, where you can just switch on your light switch, turn on your washer dryer anytime per day. That's base load. And this is something that shows the number of days that we have sunshine in Montana. I live in Kalispell. We look at Kalispell specifically. It's 151 total days with sun per year in Kalispell. That's less than half a year. And we're not talking about 24 hours. We're talking about 8 hours maybe in the winter, maybe 16 in the summer, and in the spring and fall, somewhere in between there. So we don't have enough sun for these solar panels to work. And in terms of wind, Montana is not amenable to wind power either. They get cold, they get less efficient, and sometimes they will actually shut down and stop working because of the cold. Billions of dollars into research on battery storage to solve problems with peak and baseload problems of solar and wind power. Will batteries solve the problem that we have here in Montana with sun and wind? If so, show me the evidence. There is none. I have a friend who he estimated that the new Walmart that we have here, the kind of super Walmart that we have here in Kalispell, to power that with all the, the air conditioning, the refrigeration, the freezer, keeping it cool in the summer and all that, he said that he estimated that it would require probably a battery the size of the old Walmart to just keep that one in electricity. And so I wasn't able to get him to quantify that I could share that as a fact. But I just looked in my search engine for largest lithium battery in the world to just see what this thing looks like. And this is what popped up first thing. Headlines. This is from February of this year. The world's largest lithium-ion battery is down again. It went down, I think it was twice in the same month. It says the Moss Landing Energy Storage Facility, this is in California, Phase 2 set off fire alarms that activated a fault water suppression system, which again set off a cascading set of events that resulted in roughly 10 battery packs melting down. This happened in February of this year. Doesn't sound very reliable to me. And so I looked up photos of it. This is what it looks like. These are more grisly photos of what this looks like. You can see that the areas around it are green, but not the area where this is, and not out by the water. And these are what those battery packs that they're talking about. They're not talking about a small battery pack that you put in the back of your backpack when you're going hiking or going to do something. I mean, these are what they're talking about when they talk about battery packs. These things are huge. This is what it looks like. These are the large batteries. Can solar and wind serve the power needs of citizens of cold states like Montana? Clearly not. I hope I've demonstrated that adequately. Do solar and wind reliably serve the citizens' power needs in sunny, warm states like Texas? No. We know that there was a Texas power crisis February of 2021 when a surprise winter storm swept through. Over 450,000 homes were without power. Somewhere 250 to over 700 people died during this time. Do solar and wind reliably serve the power needs of sunny, warm states like California? No. The California and Washington state headlines read something like the following: high risk of rolling blackouts. Don't charge your electric cars today. States that have recklessly, foolishly counted on solar and wind power are relying on power from Montana because they can't do it with what they have. Solar and wind power's reliance on non-sustainable materials makes them non-sustainable. So does their heavy reliance on foreign imports. Close to 100% reliance on foreign import of rare earths and solar panels, average 50% reliance on foreign import of wind turbines and stations, and close to 100% reliance on imports for some internal wind turbine parts. Rare earth metals, most of them in the world, are found in China. We know there's an energy crisis in Europe going on. Businesses are closing. They can't keep their lights on. Poverty, they're scrounging for coal, for power, scrounging for cordwood, ordering chips. They're desperately looking for whatever they can to survive the upcoming anticipated cold winter. Short answer regarding the cause of this energy crisis is those countries' reliance on foreign and green sources of power. No other explanation. Solar and wind power's reliance on government subsidies is another basis for saying they are non-sustainable. Relying on subsidies from a country multi-trillion dollars in debt, does that sound sustainable to you? So here we have the Inflation Reduction Act that was signed by Joe Biden August 16th of 2022. It is designed to give massive subsidies to promote solar and wind power in electric vehicles. And in reality, most of the benefit is going to multinational corporations and foreign governments, with a few little crumbs to electrical co-ops and people's individual homes. So why should we reject the August 16th, 2022, what I call the Life and Liberty Reduction Act? Wind and solar cannot meet our energy needs. And the focus on expensive, inefficient, and ineffectual forms of power is at the expense of petrol, coal, hydroelectric sources that serve our needs. The energy crisis in Europe, what can we learn in order to prevent our own crisis? I think it's kind of obvious. Maintain U.S. energy independence using truly reliable sources of power. Remember the headlines in Europe. Multiple countries returned to coal and natural gas this year. So the false claims made for solar, wind, power, and electric vehicles, these are false. They are not clean and green. They are not sustainable. They are not renewable. They are not effectual. Please pass this video on, the video of this presentation. As Thomas Jefferson said, an educated citizenry is a vital requisite for our survival as a free people. Pierce the darkness of the hypocrisy and deception behind the Green New Deal.